Thank you very much indeed, Cathaoirleach. I want to thank all the deputies who contributed to this debate and for the approach they took in doing so. I didn't hear someone who was fundamentally opposed to the bill or to what we're looking to do here. And what I heard, I think, reflects what I think is out there among the people of Ireland, a desire for us all to contribute, to be helped in doing so. No one pointing the finger, no one. Deputy Harkin, I think, put it very well about how we need to bring people with us. We need to show how we can all collectively do this, and particularly, I'd say, a number of deputies here today and throughout the various stages of this debate, people from rural Ireland, small farmers who maybe previously in the past have been seen as the blame. They're not. They're going to be the solution. They're going to be the people who actually are in the front line of making this change. A number of people had asked that we would set out, whatever about the intention of the bill, well, we set out, but what exactly does it mean in practice? What will come in the real actions? I want to very briefly, maybe just to start, if I can, in wrapping up, try and answer some of those changes. The first obvious one, there are various sectors that we're going to have to design and set targets for and plans for, and energy is obviously the key one. And critically, it's stopping the use of fossil fuels. It's relatively, not simple, but it's relatively clear that it's the burning of those fossil fuels, particularly the releasing of carbon and methane and other greenhouse gases into the environment, are the source of the problem. And therefore we tackle the problem at source. We stop the use of those fuels and provide better alternatives. And it has to be a better alternative. We have to design this in a way that enriches our people and doesn't impoverish them. And the reason I believe that's absolutely achievable in our country is because we happen to be a part of the world which is probably one of the richest resources in renewable energy, which I believe is going to be the centre stone of the switch away from fossil fuels. We live in a very, very windy part of the world. The Gulf Stream and the trade winds that come up from the southwest and cross our country gives us the ability to convert that into the new power systems that are going to dominate this 21st century and give us advantage not just in the energy system but the industrial system that will use that power in turn. And so first and foremost, in what actually does this mean, going zero carbon by 2050? It means we go renewable. And we do all the clever engineering and power management systems work to make sure that that is a better, more secure, more competitive, cleaner, healthier, local energy economy compared to one depending on us importing from distant parts of the world fossil fuels to burn here, disregard to see that pollution and threaten all our future. The alternative is a better future, and it'll be switching renewable. And we won't be alone in that. I mean, something significant has happened since this bill started, since it was introduced by government, is that we have seen the United Nations commit to a similar type level of change and target to what we have done. Similar level of ambition and development of renewables. We've seen the European Union adopting, committing in law, or to commit in law, for again a similar level of change and transition. We've seen our neighbour, the UK, again similarly committing to do that. We know that the Chinese, Japanese, other Asian economies are going to do the same. All are going to make this switch to this non-fossil fuel powered future. And that gives me real confidence that the economies of scale, the technological development, the research and innovation, everywhere in the world is going to be in this direction. And we happen to be based in one of the areas of the world with the greatest resource in that base power supply. We have real expertise and capability in the engineering and the deployment that I heard the Chief Executive of EirGrid today saying they've just gone beyond what anyone expected. I think it was 73% of renewable power now we can use it at one time in instantaneous, immediate renewables on our system. That's world beating. That is ahead of what anyone expected we'd be able to do, and we're going to push that to the limit. And in doing that, have real expertise, real economic expertise, which we can share with the rest of the world.
Wind.
That is a good question. What happens when there's no wind? The second key aspect or key characteristic to this, it would see connection with our neighbours. It's part of a wider international system. And when I say this in terms of the scale of change that is coming, the connection to solar from the south, nuclear in France, hydro in Scandinavia and in the Alps. The new technology, the innovations that's taking place.
10 years away.
It's not.
It is.
The Eirgard company I mentioned, who are key leading operators in this, are applying for interconnection with France, 700 megawatt interconnection, which is largely funded by the European Union.
Yeah.
We're simply going to add additional interconnection with the UK, and that's only the start of it. And that's only in the next few years that they will start to come on board. This new cable technology, the reason this is a better economy, a cable that size could take up to 2 gigawatts of power and can ship power over long distances with little to no losses. That's the revolution that's taking place. This is a new industrial revolution, and we are at the equivalent of where maybe something like Birmingham, Manchester was in the start of the last industrial revolution. We have every reason to be the centre of it again now. It will involve to get that balancing capability, we will still require fuels. That will not be gas fuels. That will not be imported LNG gas, fracked gas particularly, because we have to stop using fossil fuels. And yes, this government will issue the policy statement we've committed to in our programme to government to say that's not what we see, that's not what we support, that's not what we see the future of the Irish energy system.
Fuels.
Instead, where every country, every minister I talk to, energy minister, in Germany, in Britain, in America, in France, in China, believe that the future fuels that will be used are the likes of hydrogen, ammonia, which can be converted, that renewable power is converted using electrolysis into alternative fuels like that, which can provide the backup power that we will need. And that's why that historic announcement by ESB, equivalent to my mind to the announcement around the building of Ardnacrusha, to convert Moneypoint to be a collection point for that offshore wind, and to be a transition point where we convert that comparative advantage we have in offshore wind into hydrogen power, which we could use in Ardnacrusha, or in Irish cement, or in the Moneypoint power stations, and that gives us the stability, the better economy, the security for our future. They say that we can do that by 2028. That's a real challenge. But themselves and Equinor, the Norwegian company, are probably world leading in the ability to deliver it, and I believe we can deliver it if we get our political system and our regulatory system and our planning system right. And that's what this bill does. It has to be, anyone who talks about this energy revolution recognises that even if we have abundant supplies of offshore wind in our system, which we do, actually it's efficiency first. If you're filling a bath, you put the plug in first before you do anything else. And that's why, again, by agreement, and I'm confident that we can do this, is because it's agreed by all the parties that took part, not just in this recent Joint Oireachtas Committee hearings on the bill, but in the previous Oireachtas Joint Oireachtas Committee, which did a huge amount of really good work looking at what we should plan. And it is they, all of us, collectively said, yes, we should aim to do 500,000 houses a year. And you're right, Deputy Fitzmaurice, those two families in Roscommon, I absolutely can understand how that's a crushing thing, where they want to improve their house and they're getting a letter saying it's not possible. And they're in Tipperary and elsewhere. It's not because of shortage of ambition. It's not because of shortage of ambition in the political system. It was something like, there was something like $250 million we set aside, $250 million we set aside in the last budget for the actual meeting of those targets. And we will continue to adapt, and we'll have to do it in a whole variety of different ways to make sure we do get to every house. The advantage of this is first and foremost in health. It is a fundamental change, an improvement in air quality and in living conditions of our people. When we, at the end of this process, end up with a housing stock where we're using heat pumps, electrical heat pumps, with no emissions, with no fumes, and when we combine that with well-insulated houses, there's dramatic improvements in people's
Minister
health
Ryan, I'm
outcomes.
sorry to interrupt you just for one moment. Deputies, we have been engaged in this debate for 5 days, and at the last moment you are constantly interrupting. Can I please ask for a little bit of respect for the Minister in his summation? Minister Ryan.
As Deputy Fitzmaurice said, we have a habit, unfortunately, over the years, sitting beside each other of engaging in such banter. I must apologise, Chair, because I'm encouraging it, but it's good banter. This is the sort of engagement we will need to make sure we do get to every house. And it's every place matters, every person matters in this. There'll be no looking down, there'll be no pointing at fingers, there'll be no holier than thou. This transition, the reason it's critical, the reason that the way it's going to work is what I heard here today. I heard every deputy say that their constituents want to do it. And we have to help them do it and ask for their help rather than telling them what to do. So that engagement, that's going to continue. But I will finish my speech and we'll have to engage in another forum. In transport, we'll have to, in the next decade, go from about 12 million tonnes emissions down to 6. It's an incredible challenge because transport changes slowly. The cars we have today will still be on the road in 2030. The buses and trains will only be at the start of their life, even if we buy them today. So it's going to take time. And the development patterns that we've allowed to develop in our country, which is ever longer journeys, is going to take time to change. But change we have to, and it will be better. It will first and foremost be using electricity again rather than fossil fuels. And everyone in the car business knows now that that's a certainty. We're going to make that change because they're just better cars. Fraction of the fuel cost, fraction of the maintenance cost, better driving experience, much simpler, cleaner, quicker. They are at the moment, but they're coming down because every single car company is going to switch to them because if they don't, they're gone, they're history, they're toast, they're finished, good night, goodbye. So they're all going to switch to them. So the prices will come down and the lifetime costs will be lower. It will be cheaper. The only way it'll work is if it's cheaper and better. And I'm absolutely convinced that will be the case. But that's not enough. We also need to switch modes to get out of our cars because there's other costs with that. Accidents, congestion, our towns and villages and cities clogged up with cars rather than being a beautiful living place to be. So we do have to make the switch. And it is towards active travel first and foremost, making it safe to walk and to cycle, particularly our children. Let's start with each 4,000 primary schools, 700 secondary schools, making it safe to walk. That one change alone would transform our country and our children for the better. And again, with health outcomes. This is the best public health action we could take. Thirdly, so electrify, change modes. Thirdly, reduce the demand. Bring back strong communities. Town centres first. Bring back living on the main street. Bring back living within walking distance of the pub or the shop or the church. And that's all for the better. That creates community. And it's not saying no to someone in rural Ireland who has to be out in rural Ireland. They will be probably the first and leading benefit to change because they will be the custodians of the land. They'll be the best suited for electric vehicles because we'll be able to charge their car much more easily than someone in a terraced house in a street or in an apartment. Because actually the real industrial revolution here is how we manage the distribution grid as well as the transmission grid. But again, in my mind, stopping the sprawl and bringing back the community by building close together is absolutely what we need to do. Thirdly, in agriculture, and it is the area of 35% of our emissions that's going to be one of the hardest to change because, again, it takes time. But there's every gain to be made from that. Again, I was reading Tom Arnold's food strategy paper the other day, and I was just thinking the very simple thought. Riddle me this. Since 2008, our exports of agricultural produce went from some 8 billion up to 14 billion in 2018. Huge, and it's projected to keep going. our farm incomes for cattle and sheep farmers stayed the exact same. There wasn't a blip upwards in the price. Dairy got a slight increase, but all that increase in value, none of it went to the farmer. We are allies. We will work together with the farming community to try and change that in every way we can, starting by paying for protection and restoration of nature, which farmers themselves have in their minds, hearts, absolutely focus. They have the highest regard for their animals and for their land and for their farm and their parish. And I believe if we can get the right incentives and mechanisms to pay them for storing carbon, for restoring biodiversity, for improving water quality.
It's not in the bill.
No, the bill doesn't go into those details. What the bill says is we will sit down, all of us, and work out a mechanism to actually deliver that. And the Oireachtas will be critically involved. The mechanism in the bill is that we go back at each stage. When the 5-year budgets are put in place, when we're doing the action plans, when the sectoral plan, when we're doing the action plan, and we check and say, is there another way? We do have to do it. We can't say to the rest of the world, the reason why this makes sense for us to do it, it's not just because we're compelled to, because every country is doing it in the UN Paris Agreement, but in agriculture more than anything else, for us to do, which we can do, we will have a form of agriculture that's the best for animal welfare, that's the best for restoring the 500 pristine river systems we've lost, all but 20. That's the best in restoring the bird life, insect life, microbial life in the soil. That's not just good for the environment, but good for the future of the farm and the fertility of that soil. And we will go out and trade and be successful as a country by being origin green. But we have to be radically origin green. Like, we can't go out just with the wrapping. It has to be the full thing, the full real deal. And I'm absolutely convinced we can do that. And we will have a stronger country, and a stronger country that's ready for the climate change that's coming. It's again been a cold, dry April. Like, a lot of farmers are out there at the moment saying, God, I hope we're not having 2018 again, where there's no grass growth, when we're stuck having to import fodder, switching to mixed swards, switching to putting clover in, switching to all sorts of clever agroforestry and other systems and other revenue streams is going to be good at climate adaptation as well as mitigation, which is what we need to do. And that's central. I'm tight on time. I was going to start going about industry. We do need data centres. We have a country where we have a real skill in digital services, financial services and modern technology. And central to that is data centres. We cannot turn around and say, we want all the jobs in all these high-tech industries, but we don't want the data centres. We will have data centres. They'll be powered 100% renewable. They cannot be powered by fossil fuels. They have to contribute to the balancing solution. They have to provide district heat, so it's not just insulating our houses, it's using waste heat in a really clever way. And that's a secure future as well for our country. It has to be a just transition. To all who asked, why isn't there more details in that? Because it would take, we'd have to write a 10,000-word manual about how this has to support rural Ireland in a just transition. This has to provide jobs for our young people, and well-paid jobs, unionised jobs in a just transition. This has to prevent, and this is the best way of eradicating fuel poverty. There's no better way than actually reducing the need to have to spend money burning fossil fuels. That's the secret to addressing fuel poverty in a just transition. And it has to have a role for the public. It has to engage now. We're in a tight timeline. We want to include this year in the first of the 5-year plans. That means we're really, really tight, and it's been well used, the time, the work the Joint Oireachtas Committee has done. But we do need to get our 5-year budgets in place now, and we need to get our action plan in place. We need to do that because we have to go to Glasgow in November with our heads held high. As a country that, laggards like the prodigal sons that was off on the tear for a while, but we have come back home to actually looking after our home. And we have to have that all in place by November, when Glasgow is going to take place. And it's not just Glasgow, we go on to the one after that and the one after that. This is going to take decades. I'll finish if I can. I was reading Wendell Berry, philosopher, this morning, And it was just in relation to forestry, just one example of the changes. But he wrote something, it was in the Crown magazine back in 1997. You can apply this to every different section. It could be applied to the section, but he talks about a good forest economy. Like any other good land-based economy would... You can't what, Matty?
Can't cut trees. Can't get license.
No, but you can actually. And you can't do it in a slow way that over time you get a steady stream of products and really high value, and you convert that into really high value material that you put into your building stock. So we're not going to stuck with what we're going to see now, massive price inflation in building materials, because it'll come from our resources. It'll be a strong local economy.
Thank you, Minister.
What he says is we would aim that it's a strong local human community and local natural community, our ecosystem together, as conservingly and as healthfully as possible. A good forest economy would therefore be a local economy, and the forest economy of a state or region would therefore be a decentralised, strong economy. He goes on to talk about how it's centred on its education, is training providing education so that our children start to understand our local ecology, our local history,
Thank you,
our
Minister.
local land. And from that, we will be strong as a people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Ryan.